longest press line in Hollywood history. 2,000 feet of cameras, reporters, video cameras, still cameras, telephone cameras. Yeah! And the most important people, these guys, the fans.
The second movie's amazing, so I'm really excited for everybody to go see Dead Man's Chest.
Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest, the first sequel of the franchise, is one of the most fun, inventive, and gleefully absurd blockbuster movies ever made. It's also really stupid and convoluted. It takes a lot of what worked in Curse of the Black Pearl and pushes it further: bigger action, denser mythology, sillier comedy, and higher stakes. But it wasn't necessarily beneficial for so much of the film's identity to escalate all at once. If the original movie is a ship engineered to swim along at peak efficiency, balanced between speed and sturdiness, then Dead Man's Chest is that same ship retrofitted with extra, bigger cannons and an unnecessary number of sails that get in each other's way. They may have looked like upgrades on paper, but it's no longer as focused in its agile purpose as it once was. It may make for an even more effective spectacle, but it doesn't make for as effective of a story as it could have.
So we kind of put everything we could think of into the first one, so when they said, hey, we'd like a sequel, we're kind of going, what do we do for a sequel?
But I think the fun of the first one is that it creates this very interesting world, and that audiences wanted to see more of that world.
It's feeling like day 41. There's only 189 days left.
Dead Man's Chest opens on one of the most melodramatically morose film weddings I've ever seen, as Will and Elizabeth's marriage is interrupted by the East India Trading Company arriving to claim control of the area and arrest those who aided in Jack Sparrow's escape at the end of Curse of the Black Pearl. You can't say Verbinski doesn't know how to set a tone, but it really is almost amusingly full-on for the opening to what we all expect will go on to be as fun of a family adventure blockbuster as the previous film. To be fair, the prologue of Will getting rescued from the ocean that opened the previous film was also serious, so I guess the wedding getting engulfed in a heightened reality of cinematic melancholy is following an established structure and fits how Dead Man's fun adventure spectacle pushes the whole spectrum further than it reached in Black Pearl. Like it's announcing, yeah, everything is bigger in this one. The franchise, and this sequel especially, may feature more silliness than seriousness, but a thin layer of seriousness can go a long way to lay an emotional foundation before other plot stuff starts getting stacked on top. In this case, that is Will and Elizabeth's romance getting put on hold, and they will have to take part in the plot to pick it back up where they left off. The next scene strains the PG-13 rating about as much as the franchise ever does, at some kind of gothic, dark fantasy prison, including the gory imagery of crows pecking out living men's eyeballs, as if they wanted every parent in the audience to reconsider having brought their kids to the cinema with them. Really though, I think they just wanted a brief burst of the darkest thing they could get away with to maximise the contrast of Jack Sparrow's entrance, breaking out of a coffin he escaped in and using a skeleton leg as an oar, a kind of Dead Man's Chest of his own. His immediately silly antics, accompanied by that iconic, triumphant theme music, are almost unbelievable in how much they are able to lift the mood. A real testament to how powerful music can be for a movie, creating excitement for what Jack has in store for us after getting a quick taste from dropping in on him at the tail end of some other bizarre situation he had gotten himself into, about which no details are ever elaborated on other than his retrieval of a drawing of a key. It's nice to know that he is still getting up to that kind of stuff when we're not there to watch him. It makes him feel like a personality that extends beyond the boundaries of the plot, still affecting the world before the film begins and after it's ended.
Some of these things go completely wrong. We have to, this is the stuff we never talk about. When you write something and you really believe in it and it goes completely wrong.
The descending into the splash.
Yeah.
Sort of feels like it's working, and then it goes da 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 boom. So it kind of womp 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 instead of
Hans Zimmer was actually more involved in the soundtrack for the second, third and fourth films than he was for the first, where he wrote the main motifs, including reusing some stuff he had already used on Gladiator, before passing the rest on to one of his proteges and going off to be busy on The Last Samurai instead. Given pirates ended up being quite a big deal, he was clearly interested in taking full credit for the whole thing in round 2.
Pirates 2.
This is the Zimmer process. We have everybody in the room waiting. That's fine. And he's writing on the Casio. What do you think about this for Jack?
But you can't say Zimmer doesn't live up to his high reputation, as the soundtracks for the second and third films in particular are clearly a step up from the first in having a unique identity, and some of the iconic tracks here are still among the best music to have ever come out of Hollywood.
As you were, gents.
These early parts of the narrative, after Jack has returned to his crew on his ship with a drawing of a key, set up the mysterious horrors behind the film's antagonists, who are among the most famous figures in Pirates mythology that a Pirates sequel could have been based on: Davy Jones, the Flying Dutchman and the Kraken, and the film remains reserved on showing too much of these things for quite a while to build the suspense of their threatening presence. Bootstrap Bill Turner, a character mentioned in the backstory of the first film as Will Turner's dad, shows up below deck when Jack goes in search of more rum, with the creepy and grotesque appearance of a drowned man clearly suffering from some kind of ocean-related curse. It turns out that over a decade previously, Jack made a deal with Davy Jones, exchanging becoming captain of the Black Pearl with an eventual 100 years of servitude with the Flying Dutchman, a fate Jack has started this film desperately seeking a path to wriggle out of after barely getting to enjoy his ownership of the Pearl by looking for the only thing that would give him control over Davy Jones, his heart.
The captain seems to be acting a bit strange.
Jack's plan is momentarily put on hold because Bootstrap Bill brings with him the Black Mark. He is in such a rushed panic to get out of Kraken territory, which is seemingly the entire ocean, that he doesn't even allow anyone in his crew to jump overboard to retrieve his hat, which he was so prideful of in the first film. A hat that gets picked up by some other boat, whose demise demonstrates the Kraken's fearsome power. So we understand why a pirate as ingenious as Jack would fear it so much that he leaves the ocean he loves so much.
Governor Weatherby Swan, it's been too long.
Cutler Beckett.
Cutler Beckett is the secondary antagonist leading the East India Trading Company takeover, who will award Will and Elizabeth with freedom should Will manage to retrieve Jack's magical compass, which Beckett also wants to point him in the direction of Davy Jones's heart so that he can turn Davy Jones into his Darth Vader to help fulfill some vague purpose of conquering the ocean. After, by the end of the film, achieving that control over Davy Jones due to some unforeseen circumstances involving a returning character, Beckett becomes the primary antagonist of the third film, around which all of the pirates converge to fight a common enemy threatening their freedom. He doesn't participate in any fights, being more of a meticulous strategist rival to Jack Sparrow's improvised chaos, and he is given next to no backstory or development, leaving most of the character's success dependent on a great performance from Tom Hollander. And as the only villain in the series without the horror of a supernatural infliction to hide behind, Hollander really had his work cut out for him.
Jack Sparrow is a dying breed. The world is shrinking. The blank edges of the map filled in.
In his search for Jack, Will ends up finding the Black Pearl washed ashore an island, to which we assume he has fled to escape the Kraken, but none of Jack's crew are anywhere to be found until Will gets captured by a remote tribe that are like an offensive parody pulled straight out of an old adventure novel. Will joins the imprisonment of what remains of the rest of the crew, suspended in spherical cages made out of the bones of previous sacrifices. And by sacrifices, I mean prisoners the tribe has previously eaten, which Jack is now in the preparation stages of. Worshipped like some kind of deity before a fiery, cannibalized demise, he panics to escape from at the same time as the two groups of imprisoned crew are racing their way up the mountainside in the hopes of reaching the Black Pearl first. Tribalistic caricature notwithstanding, it is an amusing, cross-cutting sequence full of Buster Keaton-esque slapstick that memorably gathers a bunch of returning characters all in the same place on the same ship again, including the no longer immortal comedic relief duo from Barbossa's crew and the prison dog from the original theme park ride, because apparently all of this franchise takes place in a small enough stretch of ocean that all of these characters keep bumping into each other. The whole thing isn't without its subjective narrative issues. For starters, for the lengthy set piece that it is, very little of it bears any relevance to the rest of the story, returned to only in an after-credit sequence of the dog becoming the tribe's newest deity, revealing this sequel's intention to prioritize fun and often comedic action set pieces, in between which it will string convoluted layers of MacGuffins and motivations to make sure the characters keep crossing paths. Secondly, more problematically, and in hindsight of how Jack Sparrow devolves over the franchise, it is firmly planting the seeds of his diminishing depth as a character. On its own, the whole situation is already quite a bit more absurd in its slapstick than anything in the previous film, but arguably, it's still just Jack Sparrow improvising some chaos out of thin air to escape with his life. Unfortunately, simplifying the character to focus on this kookiness from here on was just too effective at being entertaining, and probably easier to write into a convoluted plot than continuing with the depth Johnny Depp was previously possessed to articulate, precisely because it was in contention with the way the character was originally written in the script. It's not nearly as egregious of a drunken Keith Richards parody as the character would eventually become in the 4th and 5th movies, and from a certain perspective, I can buy his mannerisms and slapstick antics getting more crazy in proportion to the story and its fantasy elements becoming crazier, but I do think it loses something from the original film, and I would have preferred to see that original character built off of in a different, more subtle way.
You could do that all day.
We're on our 3rd movie, and we just said, you know, how do we keep it unexpected? We said, let's just get weird.
He has balance issues. Not very subtle.
After their amusing escape off Cannibal Island, Jack seemingly braves his fear of the kraken enough to sail his crew to the swampy shack of the voodoo witch Tia Dalma, where she informs them the key to Davy Jones's chest lies with Davy Jones himself, as if that wouldn't be the first place you would think he'd keep it safe. This detour might mainly be an excuse for some expositional downtime after the island action, but like every other piece of world building in the trilogy, the environment and character have a lot of personality to them that help mask that exposition, or at the very least make it more likely to hold your attention whilst it holds your hand.
The compass you barter from me, it cannot lead you to this?
Maybe.
Tia Dalma and her barely comprehensible accent are being set up for her only slightly larger return in the 3rd film, where it is confirmed she knows this basic stuff about Davy Jones and other fantasy-related things because she is the ocean goddess he fell in love with. For now, she gives Jack a jar of dirt, protecting him from Davy Jones, because he can't step on land. But really, it's just a plot device that later gives Jack the false confidence he possesses the heart as the bargaining chip he was aiming to make it into. So now the layers of MacGuffins or plot mechanics include a compass to point towards the location of a chest and or the key required to open the chest, a heart inside the chest, and a jar of dirt that Jack decides to hide the heart in once the chest is opened with the key. Oh, and the kraken hunting down whoever gets in Davy Jones's way, or whoever is unlucky enough to pick up a possession of somebody he has set it on the trail of, because it can sense such things apparently. Besides the giant fantasy monster, that's a lot of treasure hunting even for a pirate movie.
That's the Flying Dutchman.
At night, during a thunderstorm, Jack has sailed them to a likely location of a shipwreck that matches whatever Tia Dalma did in her shack, knowing it's the sort of place the Flying Dutchman might appear to scavenge survivors. Will goes over to investigate because he trusts Jack far too much for some reason. I know he saved him from execution at the end of the first film after having grown to understand his unpredictable moral compass that would give anyone a bad first impression, but Jack does still behave enough like a pirate that he almost angrily shot Elizabeth in the back of the head after she burnt the secret stash of rum, and Will did in this film reunite with him when he seemed focused on trying to save his own skin as the deity of a remote tribe of cannibals who had imprisoned the entire crew. When Will is investigating this shipwreck, the ghostly, mythological Flying Dutchman crashes out from underneath the water and offers the stranded wreckage survivors, who Will has gotten caught up with, a grim choice: die here at sea, or accept an arbitrary period of conscription aboard the Dutchman, gradually becoming one of his monstrous, fishy crew.
Do you feel death?
Once Jones realizes that Jack is watching from a short distance aboard the Black Pearl, he makes the sinister, direct confrontation of teleporting right in front of him, instantly breaking the franchise's power scaling, as though traversing the seas were entirely trivial to him and his presence were as inescapable as the Grim Reaper. Jack could have been screwed at this exact moment, begging the question of why he thought getting anywhere near the Flying Dutchman was a good idea at all. But fortunately, the grotesque amalgamation of man, octopus and crab standing before him seems to like playing with his prey, bargaining that Jack's debt of his own soul will be forgiven should he manage, within 3 days, to deliver to the Dutchman 100 different souls instead.
3 days.
In the meantime, Will is forced to serve on the crew of the Dutchman, not just as a kind of insurance to ensure Jack will at least attempt to follow through with his new, near impossible to fulfill deal, but as the first of those 100 souls. Oh dear. It seems Jack has now royally screwed over both himself and Will. But, of course, this dilemma was necessary because the key to the chest lies with Jones himself.
Then you're a poor captain, but a captain nonetheless. Have you not introduced yourself all these years as Captain Jack Sparrow?
Davy Jones is still considered one of the most convincing CGI characters ever created. A variety of harsh lighting setups and the moisture from the sea wetting his fishy skin blend him into the set pieces. On top of that, you have something like watching him very passionately play an organ with and smoke a pipe through his tentacles, so they actually feel like functional parts of his body he's learnt to live with. The result is that this grotesquely monstrous concept you would think stretches the suspension of disbelief to its limits feels no less tangible than the real human actors, with the exception of exactly one shot that happens to be the first time his face makes an appearance, where he doesn't look quite as three-dimensional as the actor he's closely facing.
Everybody thought Davy would be this big, serious, ominous sort of character, and Bill's kind of made him really funny and unique and odd.
Your son was fortunate enough to find a ship, and yet not so fortunate as to find land.
He does a lot of very interesting, quirky things in the movie.
Price.
And they're the kinds of things that if what amounts to a committee is working on that later, that somebody would object to it. Because it's a communication between Gore and Bill on set and they work this out, I think we get a higher level of performance that doesn't get sort of discussed to death.
So Will is briefly trapped aboard the grim atmosphere of the Flying Dutchman, inhabited by Davy Jones, his almost equally visually impressive crew, and Bootstrap Bill. The idea of a ship meant to ferry dead sailors to the afterlife turning evil, and through their evil transforming into sea monsters, isn't explored to its full potential, but given the dense plots these movies squeeze into their under 3-hour runtimes, there's still so much personality in the little bit of time we spend immersed here, such as a confusing dice game in which crewmates can gamble their years of servitude, which Will of course gets heroically involved in despite being thoroughly unfamiliar with the rules. From there, Will figures out that Davy Jones keeps the key tucked within his tentacle beard, and, in a scene that's admittedly convenient and a bit too comedic for the villain to fully maintain his menacing presence, sneaks into the captain's quarters where a music box lulls Jones into slumber at his organ and proceeds to delicately rummage through the tentacles before essentially Indiana Jonesing the key and making his escape. It seems the slapstick shenanigans of Jack Sparrow has been rubbing off on Will a little bit.
That dress. Where did you get it? It was found aboard the ship.
Meanwhile, since Will and Jack reunited, Elizabeth has been having a journey of her own. Rather than remaining a damsel in distress in jail, she and her father attempt to escape Beckett, and when his mysterious special agent assassin guy intercepts them, she inexplicably sneaks out of the carriage unnoticed, confronts Beckett directly, and makes her own deal to win her freedom, whilst being pissed off about her and Will's wedding night getting stolen. Clearly, spending time around Jack and his crew has rubbed off on her as well.
In the first film, the writers would keep coming up to me and saying, what do you want, what do you want? And I was like, I want a sword fight. I'm in a pirate movie, I want a sword fight, and they wouldn't give it to me. So in this film, I have many sword fights.
Elizabeth disguises herself as a man and manipulates a superstitious crew into taking her where she needs to go by convincing them their ship is haunted. And it's when she steers them to what seems to be the pirate commercial capital of Tortuga that she and Jack coincidentally cross paths, whilst he is busy trying to recruit a crew of drunken misfits to pay off his new 100-soul debt, one of which turns out to be a severely downtrodden Norrington returning to participate in a humorous drunken brawl.
Come on, who's fast?
He wasn't really a villain in the first film, more like an antagonistic obstacle to get in Jack's way and bargain with, but proving himself more reasonable than we might have expected by giving up Elizabeth and giving Jack a head start to escape has put him in the miserable and worthless situation he's in now. And it turns out that letting somebody who now has every reason to look out only for themselves join your crew, specifically letting them in on the plan to retrieve Davy Jones's heart, isn't such a good idea.
It points to the thing you want most in this world.
If Jack hadn't run into either Norrington or Elizabeth in Tortuga, I'm not sure who else he might have tried to convince they want the heart after handing them his compass. Maybe he really was just planning to try and recruit 99 souls. Regardless, Elizabeth and Norrington may have originally expected to marry during the first film, but reunited here, separated from Will, there isn't really a reinvigorated romantic interest between them. Rather, now deciding to shoehorn this slightly out of character love triangle between Elizabeth, Will and Jack instead, as if Elizabeth would actually consider Jack another option, enough to confuse the compass when it is in her hands, just as it has remained confused in Jack's hands because of the kraken. The added, awkward flirtation is an unconvincing test of Elizabeth's loyalty to Will, failing to create any actual love triangle tension, and so the popular running theory is that the compass points to Jack for her because of what he represents about pirating freedom. Even still, it deals its narrative damage by pigeonholing Elizabeth into a generic Hollywood emotional conflict that just gives her something shallow to keep busy with, so it seems like she has some kind of arc beyond get back to Will and marry him and have babies, when really they could have given her something stronger and more believable to add to the rest of the trilogy's story.
I think with Elizabeth, she's got quite a lot darker. The relationship with Will has progressed, well, it starts kind of falling apart in a way, and the one with Jack Sparrow grows into something rather interesting.
I just thought I'd be married by now. I'm so ready to be married. You're going to want to know what it tastes like.
As I said, it at best provides thematic representation of Elizabeth feeling stuck between governor's daughter life and pirate sailing life, but the events of the story push her towards the latter regardless of this manufactured love triangle that just ends up getting used as a plot device to force Jack into sacrificing himself later and to make Will a bit sad and confused going into the third movie, whilst his motivation continues to revolve around saving his dad from the Flying Dutchman. Anyway, Jack, Norrington and Elizabeth locate and dig up the chest in a mundane but strangely cinematic spot, an unceremonious stretch of beach that makes for a conveniently open convergence point as Will just so happens to arrive at that exact moment with the key, fresh off surviving a kraken attack. What follows is the film's and arguably the franchise's standout set piece, and one of the most inventive set pieces I've ever seen come out of Hollywood. A three-way water wheel riding fight over the quay between Jack, Will and Norrington, whilst Elizabeth and the comedic relief duo try to keep the chest out of the hands of the Flying Dutchman crew. The exhilarating music, inventive shot choices, impressive practicality of the stunts and effects, and of course the choreography are all fancy bonuses on top of an already compelling showdown between competing objectives. Despite the constantly shifting geography inherent to the water wheel, the audience always understands the three essential components of where the key is, where the chest is, and who currently possesses either of them. It is the kind of ambitious, meticulously choreographed set piece that feels almost impossible to imagine emerging from today's blockbuster assembly line. Certainly not as practically as this, with the lead actors actually rolling around the inside of a big wheel in the jungle.
Gore has a saying which is that CG is not a verb, because often people will say, don't worry about it, just CG it. And part of the implication of that is that you can't just do anything with CG. CG has to be used, in the right way at the right time, intercut with and building on live action that basically sells to the audience's eye that you really are there.
Nothing they could ask would surprise me anymore, Johnny, we're gonna put you in a cannon and vault you out to sea. You okay with that? Sure. Let's do it.
This all culminates in Jack using the key to take the heart out of the chest and hide it in his jar of dirt, only for Norrington to come along and figure out that Jack hid it in his jar of dirt, remove it, and pretend to sacrifice himself so nobody notices him take the heart back to Beckett. And then, in one of the most memed moments in movie history from the old days of YouTube, Jack boasts about his jar of dirt until it falls and smashes open to reveal his leverage against Davy Jones was not inside it. What feels like less than 5 minutes after we concluded the water wheel fight, we get another great action set piece with the crew aboard the Black Pearl fighting the kraken that has been built up the whole film. Will and Elizabeth proving what a great team they are and how much they've come into their own as sailors and captains, whilst Jack flees the ship, only to return and get handcuffed aboard when Elizabeth distracts him with a kiss. Imagining watching this without any knowledge of At World's End, like it's 2006 and the film literally hasn't come out yet, I'd hope that some meaningful development was being set up for Jack to remain an interesting and morally complex character, such as realising the crew is more valuable to him than the Black Pearl, and that whilst he might not have wanted to die alone aboard the Pearl, he would want to flee and plan what to do next with his crew.
So tell me, what's become of my ship?
To set up the mission to rescue Jack, At World's End inherits the cliffhanger ending of Dead Man's Chest, with Barbossa's surprise return confirming that this world's fantasy extends as far as cheating death itself. Bringing back the original villain, considered by many the franchise's finest and one of its strongest performances, is an undeniably effective hook for the trilogy's climactic chapter. The trade-off is that Dead Man's Chest sacrifices the satisfying narrative closure that made Curse of the Black Pearl work so well as a standalone adventure. Like many middle chapters, its ending exists primarily to launch the final, leaving its story permanently tied to and ultimately judged alongside the success of its successor.